The emergency meeting had been going on for 3 hours, and Ambassador Ren Halsey wanted nothing more than to disappear through the floor. Around her, representatives from 17 different species argued in voices that ranged from squeaks to rumbles that shook the chamber walls. At the center of every screen, every hologram, every angry gesture was the same problem they had been dealing with for the past 6 months. Sareth the Dragon Emperor had destroyed another handler. Well, not destroyed exactly. The Velothian Beastmaster had survived, but he would spend the next month regenerating his tail and recovering from severe burns. That made him number 18 on the list of qualified professionals who had tried and failed to manage the last Imperial Dragon. Ren rubbed her temples and tried to focus on what Director Moraine was saying. The Faloran administrator's fur had gone from its usual silver to an agitated gray, and his whiskers twitched with barely controlled frustration. "This cannot continue," Moraine said, his voice sharp. "Sareth is a relic of the old empire, yes. He is culturally significant, yes. But he is also dangerous, unpredictable, and apparently unwilling to accept any authority whatsoever." On the central display, footage from this morning played on repeat. Sareth was enormous, easily the size of a small building, with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian. His eyes burned gold, and when he opened his mouth to roar at the approaching handler, flames bright enough to white out the cameras had erupted across the stable grounds. He destroyed the entire West Wing. A counselor from Andros Prime reported, "The repairs will cost millions." "The cost is irrelevant," another voice interrupted. Ren turned to see High Keeper Breslin rise from his seat. The old Androsian moved slowly, his age showing in every careful step, but his voice carried authority. "Sareth is the last of the Imperial bloodline. To sedate him permanently or exile him will be to spit on 10,000 years of tradition. Tradition does not justify keeping a dangerous animal in the heart of our capital," Moraine shot back. "He is not an animal," Breslin said quietly. "He is a person. Perhaps that is why all your handlers fail. They treat him as a beast to be broken rather than an individual to be understood." Ren found herself leaning forward. She had been thinking the same thing for weeks now, watching handler after handler approach Sareth with control harnesses, neural inhibitors, and dominance protocols. Every single one assumed the dragon needed to be managed, controlled, made to submit. "What do you suggest, High Keeper?" Ren asked. "Everyone we have sent has the best credentials in the galaxy. Beast masters, dragon specialists, even a Keltorian mind speaker. All of them approached Sareth with respect and proper training. All of them failed." Breslin turned his ancient eyes to her. "Perhaps that is the problem, Ambassador. They all had expectations. They all wanted something from Sareth. They all came with plans and protocols and centuries of knowledge about what a dragon should be. You want us to send someone ignorant?" Moraine asked, incredulous. "I want you to send someone who has nothing to prove," Breslin replied. "Someone who will not try to make Sareth fit into a predetermined role." The chamber fell silent. Ren felt an idea forming, one that would probably get her laughed out of the room. But then again, every conventional approach had failed. Maybe it was time to try something unconventional. "I have a suggestion," she said slowly. "We just received a new group of humans through the labor exchange program. Young people from Earth, here to learn and work in various positions across Andros Prime. One of them was assigned to stable maintenance. You want to send a janitor to handle the most powerful dragon in the known galaxy." Moraine's voice dripped with disbelief. "Not to handle him," Ren said. "To clean his enclosure. To exist in the same space. To have no expectations whatsoever beyond sweeping floors and changing water." She looked at Breslin. "Isn't that what you suggested? Someone with nothing to prove." The High Keeper's expression was unreadable. "What is this human's name?" Ren pulled up the file on her datapad. "Danny Chun, 17 years old, from a place called Montana on Earth. His experience includes working on a family ranch with various livestock. No formal training in xenobiology, no dragon handling certification, no experience with any alien species at all beyond the past 2 weeks since he arrived." "This is absurd," someone muttered. "So is sending 18 qualified professionals who all ended up injured or traumatized," Ren countered. "We have tried everything else. What do we have to lose? Breslin was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. The boy can clean Sereth's enclosure. Nothing more. He will not approach the dragon, will not speak to him unless spoken to, will not attempt any bonding protocols or training exercises. He will simply do his job. And when Sereth kills him, Moraine asked bluntly, then we will know that Sereth truly is beyond reaching, Breslin said. But I do not think that will happen. Dragons are excellent judges of character. They sense intention. If this boy comes with no agenda, no desire to control or change Sereth, the dragon may surprise us all. The vote was close, but desperation won out over caution. Ren left the chamber with authorization to assign Danny Chun to the Imperial stables, wondering if she had just given a teenage boy a job or a death sentence. She found his file again and stared at the photo. He looked impossibly young, with dark hair and a slight smile that suggested he had no idea what he was getting into. Tomorrow morning, Danny would meet Sereth, the dragon who had refused every handler, who had terrorized the most skilled beast masters in the galaxy, who had not allowed anyone close enough to touch him in over 300 years. Ren could only hope that Breslin was right about dragons being good judges of character, because she had just bet a young human's life on it. Dawn had not yet broken over Andros Prime when Danny Chun arrived at the Imperial stables, carrying a bucket of cleaning supplies and trying very hard not to think about what he was about to do. The building loomed before him, ancient stone mixed with modern technology, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. His hands were shaking. He noticed this and felt annoyed with himself. Back home in Montana, he had worked with plenty of difficult animals. Bulls that could kill you with one kick. Horses that had been abused and trusted no one. Even a wolf-dog hybrid that everyone said was too dangerous to keep. But none of those animals were the size of a house, could breathe fire, and had hospitalized 18 trained professionals in the past 6 months. Highkeeper Breslin met him at the entrance. The old Androsian looked him up and down with eyes that had seen centuries pass. You are very young, Breslin observed. Yes, sir, Danny replied, because there was nothing else to say to that. Do you know what you are walking into? A stable that needs cleaning, sir. Something that might have been approval flickered across Breslin's face. Good answer. Remember that. You are not here to fix Sereth, to train him, to bond with him, or to accomplish anything beyond your assigned duties. You will clean his enclosure, maintain his water supply, and remove any debris. You will not touch him. You will not approach him directly. You will not attempt to communicate with him beyond basic courtesy. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Breslin led him through corridors that grew progressively larger until they reached a massive door carved with symbols Danny could not read. The Highkeeper placed his hand on a scanner, and the door began to open with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. One more thing, Breslin said quietly. If you feel afraid, do not run. Predators chase what runs. Stand still, keep your eyes lowered, and back away slowly. Sereth will respect that more than panic. Then the door was fully open, and Danny stepped through into a space so vast it had its own weather system. Warm air rose in currents. In the distance, he could see the curved ceiling, easily 200 feet up. The enclosure stretched out like a small valley, with rocky outcroppings, a large pool of water, and scorched earth marking where fire had burned. There was no sign of Sereth. Danny took a breath and started walking. His footsteps echoed in the enormous space. He found a good corner to start from and began sweeping, falling into the familiar rhythm of work. It calmed him, made the situation feel less impossible. Just a stable, just a floor to sweep. Never mind that the stable could hold a dozen buildings and the floor was scarred with claw marks deeper than his arm was long. He talked while he worked, a habit from back home. All right, let's start with the basics. Get the loose debris, then we can worry about the burn marks. Though I'm not sure what I'm supposed to use on fire damage. They did not exactly cover that in the orientation. A piece of broken monitoring equipment went into his collection bag. Then some shed scales, each one the size of his hand and surprisingly beautiful, dark with rainbow shimmers along the edges. You know, my grandpa used to say that animals are not problems to solve, Danny continued, moving deeper into the space. He said they are just individuals who try to live their lives, same as us. People get into trouble when they forget that, when they start thinking an animal should act a certain way instead of just letting it be what it is. He found something interesting near the eastern wall, a collection of objects carefully arranged, fragments of crystal that caught the light, pieces of old armor, tarnished but placed with obvious intention, a few colorful stones that must have come from somewhere off-world. It reminded Danny of his own collection back home, rocks and feathers and interesting things he had found over the years. He sat down near the collection, careful not to touch anything. "I had a collection too," he said to the empty air. "Nothing fancy, just stuff I found by the creek behind our house. My mom said I was part magpie, always picking up shiny things. There was this one stone, perfectly smooth, and it fit right in my palm. I used to carry it in my pocket when things got hard. Stupid, maybe, but it helped." The temperature in the enclosure changed. Danny felt it on his skin, a sudden wave of heat. He did not move, did not turn around, just kept his eyes on the collection in front of him. "I know you are there," he said quietly. "I'm just going to finish up and get out of your way. Did not mean to intrude on your space." A sound like an avalanche made him look up despite himself. Sareth was there, 20 feet away, so massive that Danny's brain struggled to process the scale. Obsidian scales caught the light. Eyes like molten gold fixed on him with an intelligence that was absolutely, terrifyingly aware. Danny froze. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he remembered Breslin's words. He lowered his eyes and stayed very, very still. Seconds passed. Then minutes. The dragon did not move, did not breathe fire, did not attack, just watched. Finally, Danny spoke. "I will come back tomorrow, if that is all right, to finish the cleaning. But I can leave now if you want." He stood slowly, gathered his supplies, and walked toward the exit. It took everything he had not to look back, not to rush. Steady steps, calm breathing. When he reached the door and finally turned, Sareth had not moved. Those golden eyes still watched him. Danny nodded once, a gesture of respect, and left. Outside, Breslin was waiting with Ambassador Wren. They both looked shocked. He did not attack. Wren breathed. "No," Breslin agreed. He did not. Danny wiped sweat from his forehead. "Is it always that hot in there?" "Only when Sareth wants it to be," Breslin said. "The fact that you survived the heat means he was deciding whether to kill you or not. He chose not to." "Great," Danny muttered. "Tomorrow should be fun then." But despite the fear, despite the insanity of the situation, a small part of him was already looking forward to it. 5 days had passed since Danny started his work in Sareth's enclosure, and the routine had become almost comfortable. Almost. It was hard to feel completely at ease around a creature that could incinerate you with a thought, but Danny had learned to read the dragon's moods. When Sareth wanted silence, the enclosure felt heavy and still. When he was more receptive, there was a subtle shift in the air, a warmth that felt less like threat and more like presence. Today felt like a receptive day. Danny unpacked his lunch near the pool of water where Sareth sometimes rested. The dragon was currently perched on his favorite outcropping, watching with those unsettling golden eyes. Danny had stopped trying to ignore the attention. Instead, he had started treating it like companionship. "You would not believe the food they serve in the cafeteria," Danny said, unwrapping something that was supposed to be a sandwich but looked more like blue paste between gray bread. "I mean, I know I'm on Alien Space Station and I should be grateful for the experience and all that, but I would kill for a normal burger right now. My mom makes these incredible burgers with cheese and bacon and these special pickles she makes herself." He took a bite and immediately regretted it. "Yeah, this is terrible, but I'm too hungry to care." Movement caught his eye. Sareth had shifted, his enormous head tilting slightly. It was the most engagement the dragon had shown, and Danny felt a small thrill of something that might have been progress. "You probably eat things way more interesting than sandwiches," Danny continued, "though I have no idea what dragons eat. They did not cover that in my orientation either. Nobody tells me anything useful." He finished his sad lunch and went back to work. There was a section of the enclosure where the walls showed scorch marks from some past incident, and Danny had been carefully scrubbing them clean. It was slow work, but he did not mind. Gave him time to think, and the repetitive motion was soothing. "You know what I miss most about home?" he said, more to himself than to Sareth. "The sky. I mean, the view from a station is incredible, do not get me wrong. All those stars and planets and stuff. But it is not the same as real sky. Montana sky. Big and blue, and so open you feel like you could fall up into it." He paused in his scrubbing, lost in the memory. "My grandpa used to take me camping up in the mountains. We would lie on our backs and watch the stars, and he would tell me about the constellations. Not the scientific stuff, the stories, the myths. He said every culture in human history looked up at the same stars and saw their own truth in them." Another sound made him turn. Sareth had moved closer, silent despite his size. The dragon was now only about 10 feet away, near enough that Danny could see the individual scales, the old scars that marked his hide, the way his breath created small heat distortions in the air. Danny's heart hammered, but he kept his voice steady. "Hey there, you're being pretty social today." Sareth made a sound, low and rumbling, that vibrated through the stone floor. Not a growl exactly, more like a very large cat's purr. If that cat was the size of a building and could melt steel with its breath, then Danny noticed something. The way Sareth was holding himself, one shoulder slightly higher than the other. The tension in the muscles along his neck. The dragon was in pain. "Something hurts," Danny said softly. It was not a question. Sareth's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Danny thought he had overstepped. But then the dragon shifted again, angling his body to show his left shoulder. There, wedged between two large scales, was a piece of broken metal. It looked like part of a monitoring device, probably from one of the previous incidents. The skin around it was inflamed, angry red against the black scales. "That looks bad," Danny said. "I could help if you want, but only if you want. I'm not going to force anything." He waited, giving Sareth time to decide. The dragon could kill him right now, could end this with one blast of fire. Instead, slowly, with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large, Sareth lowered himself to the ground. It was a position of complete vulnerability, and Danny understood the trust it represented. "Okay," Danny breathed. "Okay, I'm going to come closer now." He approached carefully, keeping his movements slow and predictable. Up close, Sareth was even more incredible. The scales were like polished gemstones, and the heat radiating from his body was intense but not unbearable. Danny could see his own reflection in those obsidian surfaces. "I'm going to touch you now," he warned. "It might hurt a little when I pull this out." He placed one hand on the scale near the wound, feeling the warmth and the slight vibration of Sareth's breathing. With his other hand, he carefully gripped the embedded metal. "Okay, 3, 2, 1. He pulled. The metal came free with a wet sound that made Danny's stomach turn. Blood, darker than human blood and hot enough to steam, welled from the wound. Danny quickly cleaned it with supplies from his kit, talking the whole time about the time he had to pull porcupine quills from his dog back home, keeping his voice calm and steady. Sareth remained perfectly still through the whole process, but Danny could feel the tension in the massive body beneath his hands. When he finally stepped back, the wound cleaned and treated, the dragon lifted his head and looked at Danny with something that might have been gratitude. Then Sareth did something Danny had never seen before. He extended one massive wing. The membrane stretched thin enough to show light through it, and curved it forward. It was a gesture, deliberate and clear. Danny reached out, hesitant, and touched the wing with one hand. Light exploded beneath Sareth's scales. Golden light, running in patterns like circuitry, like fire, like rivers of molten sun. It raced across the dragon's entire body, and Danny felt something lock into place in his chest, a connection that had not been there before. Outside the enclosure, alarms began to sound. Breslin's voice came over the intercom, shaking with shock. "The bond mark. Sareth has chosen his rider." Danny stared at his hand, then at Sareth, then at the golden light still flickering beneath those ancient scales. "Well," he said faintly, "I did not see that coming." The council chamber looked like someone had dropped a bomb made of angry politicians into it. Representatives shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. Director Moraine's fur had gone from gray to nearly white with stress. Ambassador Wren sat in her chair, looking like she could not decide whether to be proud or terrified. And in the center of it all, displayed on every screen, was footage of golden light spreading across Sereth's scales while a 17-year-old human boy touched his wing. Danny stood in a side room, watching through a transparent wall, and wondered how his life had gotten this weird this fast. "This is impossible," someone was yelling. "Humans do not have the genetic markers for dragon bonding. It cannot happen." "And yet it has happened," Breslin replied, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. "The bond mark has never been faked in 10,000 years of recorded history. Sereth has chosen, and we must accept his choice. Accept that a child with no training, no noble blood, no qualifications whatsoever has bonded with the most powerful dragon in the known galaxy." A counselor from one of the traditional houses looked like he might have a heart attack. "This makes a mockery of everything we stand for." "What you stand for," Breslin said coldly, "is control. You wanted Sereth as a weapon, as a symbol of power. He refused to be either. Perhaps that is the lesson you should be learning." Wren stood up. "Whether we like it or not, the bond is real. The question now is what we do about it. I propose we verify it through the traditional trials. If Danny and Sereth can pass, then we accept the bond as legitimate. If they fail, then we know something is wrong." The room went quiet. Danny felt his stomach drop. He had heard about the trials. Every bonded dragon and rider in history had to pass them. They were designed to test the strength and truth of the connection, and they were not easy even for people who had trained their whole lives. Moraine looked at him through the transparent wall. "Does the human even know what he is agreeing to?" Wren turned to Danny. Through the wall, their eyes met, and she mouthed the question. Danny thought about Sereth, about the trust the dragon had shown by lowering himself to the ground, about the feeling of that connection settling into his chest like it had always belonged there. He nodded. The trials were set for 1 week out. Danny spent every moment of that week with Sereth and slowly began to understand what the bond actually meant. It was not control. It was not mind reading. It was more like having a second heartbeat in his chest, a constant awareness of another presence. He could sense Sereth's moods, his general direction, his needs. And Sereth could sense the same from him. Breslin helped them train, though he made it clear he was bending several rules by doing so. The trials are meant to be passed by pairs who have worked together for years, the High Keeper explained as Danny practiced mounting Sereth for the first time. "You have days, so we focus on the basics. Trust your bond. Do not overthink. Sereth knows what to do. You just need to move with him instead of against him." Moving with the dragon turned out to be harder than it sounded. Sereth's muscles were like steel cables under his scales, and when he moved fast. Danny fell off 6 times the first day alone. But each time, Sereth waited patiently for him to climb back on, and each time, Danny understood the movement a little better. Other dragon riders came to watch. Most were skeptical. A few were openly hostile. But one, a human military captain named Yates who rode a younger dragon named Swift, approached Danny after a particularly rough practice session. "You are doing it wrong," Yates said bluntly. Danny, bruised and tired, looked up at him. "I kind of figured that out when I hit the ground for the 10th time. No, I mean your whole approach. You're trying to learn how to ride a dragon. That is not how the bond works." Yates sat down next to him. "I spent 3 years trying to make Swift do what I wanted. 3 years of fighting and struggling and getting nowhere. Know what finally worked? I stopped trying to ride him and started trying to understand him. The moment I did that, everything clicked." "How do I do that?" Danny asked. "You already are," Yates said. "That is why Sereth chose you. You did not come to him trying to be a dragon rider. You came to him as yourself, and you let him be himself. Do not lose that now, just because everyone is watching." The word stuck with Danny. That night, lying on his bunk in the station's human quarters, he thought about what Yates had said. He thought about Sereth, alone in his enclosure, and felt that second heartbeat in his chest. The dragon was calm tonight, resting. But there was something else there too. An edge of anxiety that Danny realized was coming from him. Not Sereth, but he was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of looking stupid in front of the entire galaxy. scared of proving everyone right who said a human could not do this. Through the bond, he felt Sereth's response. Not words exactly, more like a feeling of solid presence, of strength that had endured for centuries. The dragon had survived worse than trials. They would survive this too. Danny fell asleep with that certainty warming him and dreamed of flying. The morning of the first trial came too fast. Danny stood in the staging area while technicians attached monitoring devices and officials explained the rules. The asteroid field course stretched out before them, a nightmare of spinning rocks and narrow passages that would challenge even experienced pairs. "You will have one attempt," the officiator announced. "Failure to complete the course, or any injury to dragon or rider, will result in disqualification." Danny climbed onto Sereth's back. He could feel the dragon's readiness, the coiled power waiting to be released. Around them, thousands of beings watched through holographic feeds. The entire galaxy was about to see whether a 17-year-old stable hand from Montana could fly with a dragon emperor. "Ready," Danny whispered. Sereth's rumble of agreement vibrated through them both. The signal fired. They launched into the asteroid field, and for the first time since the bond formed, Danny and Sereth moved as one. The asteroid was spinning directly toward Danny's head, and he did not flinch. He did not need to. Sereth rolled left with a precision that would have been impossible a week ago, and the massive rock passed close enough for Danny to feel the cold radiating from its surface. Then they were through the gap, banking hard into a corkscrew descent that brought them under a cluster of smaller asteroids. Danny was not directing any of this. He was not giving commands, or pulling reins, or trying to steer. He was simply existing in the same space as Sereth, feeling what the dragon intended, letting his body shift and adjust to match those intentions. When Sereth dove, Danny leaned forward. When Sereth banked, Danny's weight moved to support the turn. They were not rider and mount. They were a single entity with two minds and one purpose. The course was designed to separate dragon from rider, to test the strength of their physical connection. Tight squeezes that required perfect timing. Sudden obstacles that demanded split-second decisions. Spinning debris fields that could disorient even the most experienced pairs. Sereth moved through it all like water flowing downhill, finding the path of least resistance with an ease that seemed impossible. Danny felt the dragon's joy through their bond, the pure pleasure of movement and flight after so many years of being grounded, being contained, being treated as a problem to manage rather than a being to celebrate. They cleared the final obstacle, a narrow tunnel through the largest asteroid, and emerged on the other side to find the course complete. Their time flashed on the display screens. Not the fastest ever recorded, but well within acceptable limits. More importantly, they had done it with a grace that made it look effortless. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered. Others looked confused, as if they could not quite believe what they had just witnessed. Danny heard the commentators discussing it, their voices reaching him through the comms system. They did not fly the course so much as dance through it, one was saying. "I have never seen such synchronization from a newly bonded pair." The second trial began immediately. Combat coordination. Automated drones swarmed toward them, firing training rounds that would sting but not seriously injure. The goal was to eliminate all targets while avoiding being hit more than 3 times. Traditional riders used verbal commands for this trial. Dragon goes left, rider marks targets on the right. Constant communication to coordinate attacks. But Danny and Sereth did not need words. The bond told them everything they needed to know. Danny sensed which drones Sereth planned to hit with fire and focused his attention on the ones coming from the opposite direction, trusting the dragon to handle his side. When a cluster attacked from above, they moved in perfect unison, Sereth rolling to give Danny a clear line of sight, while simultaneously unleashing a stream of flame that took out 4 drones at once. It was like the best kind of teamwork Danny had ever experienced, the kind where you knew your partner so well that you did not need to discuss the plan. You just acted and trusted they would be where you needed them to be. They cleared the combat trial without taking a single hit. The drones lay in pieces around them, and Sereth landed with a satisfied rumble that Danny felt through his entire body. in the observation area. Even the skeptics were starting to look impressed. Yates gave Danny a thumbs up. Breslin watched with an expression that might have been pride. But Danny noticed others who did not look happy at all. A counselor named Pritchard kept whispering to his aides, his face twisted with anger. The third trial would not happen for 3 days. The Soul Flight, where Dragon and Rider were separated by 50 miles and had to find each other using only their bond, then navigate together through a course that stripped away every physical sense. It was the ultimate test of connection, and historically, only pairs who had been bonded for years ever succeeded. Danny tried not to think about the pressure. Instead, he spent the next few days with Sareth, not training but simply being together. They flew for pleasure, soaring over the mountains outside the city. They sat in comfortable silence in the enclosure. They communicated through the bond, learning its depths and limits. On the second night, Danny woke from sleep with a sudden spike of alarm that was not his own. Sareth was in distress. Not physical pain, but emotional turmoil. Fear. The dragon, who had faced down armies and lived for centuries, was afraid. Danny ran to the stables in his sleep clothes. He found Sareth pacing the enclosure, his scales flickering with agitated light. The moment Danny entered, the dragon's anxiety flooded through their bond so strongly it nearly knocked him over. "Hey," Danny said softly, approaching without hesitation. "Hey, it is okay. I am here." Sareth lowered his massive head, and Danny wrapped his arms around the dragon's snout, a gesture that would have been suicidal a month ago. Through the bond, he felt what Sareth was feeling. The dragon was not afraid of the trial. He was afraid of losing Danny, afraid that this connection, this friendship, will be taken away like everything else in his long, lonely life. "You're not going to lose me," Danny promised. "I do not care what anyone says. I do not care about the trials or the politics or what is supposed to be possible. You chose me, and I choose you. That is not going to change." The light beneath Sareth's scales steadied, shifting from agitated flickers to a warm, constant glow. The dragon's fear eased, replaced by something deeper. Trust. Not the kind you give because you have to, but the kind you give because you want to. They stayed like that for a long time, boy and dragon, connected by a bond that should not exist but did anyway. What Danny did not know was that while they sat together, Counselor Pritchard was in a tech lab, programming a neural disruptor into the equipment Danny would wear for the Soul Flight. A device designed to cloud the bond, to make it impossible for them to find each other. If a human stable boy was going to make a mockery of tradition, Pritchard would ensure he failed in the most public, humiliating way possible. The transport vehicle took Danny 50 miles north to a barren valley where wind carved strange shapes in the redstone. He wore the standard equipment for the Soul Flight, including the neural monitoring band around his head that would track his bond connection for the officials. The moment the band activated, pain spiked through his skull like someone had driven a nail between his eyes. Danny gasped and nearly fell. The technician caught him, concerned. "Are you all right?" "Fine," Danny lied, blinking away spots in his vision. "Just nervous." But it was not nerves. Something was wrong with the equipment. The bond, usually a steady presence in his chest, felt distant and fuzzy, like trying to hear someone speaking through water. He could barely sense Sareth's direction, and the dragon's emotions came through garbled and unclear. The officiator's voice crackled through his comm. "The trial begins in 60 seconds. You must reach your dragon using only your bond, then navigate the sensory deprivation course together. Failure will result in disqualification. Do you understand?" "I understand," Danny said, even though his head was pounding and the bond felt like it was slipping away entirely. 50 miles away, he felt Sareth's sudden spike of panic through the interference. The dragon could sense something was wrong. The countdown began. Danny closed his eyes and tried to focus past the pain, past the static in his head. He reached for that second heartbeat, that constant awareness that had become as natural as breathing. But it was like grasping at smoke. Every time he thought he had it, the interference scattered it again. 30 seconds. 20. In those final moments, Danny made a choice. He stopped fighting the interference. stopped trying to force the bond to work the way it had before. Instead, he went quiet inside himself, remembered what Sereth had taught him about stillness, about being present instead of striving. And there, beneath the artificial noise, beneath all the interference and pain, he found something deeper. The bond was not in his head. It was in his heart, in the part of him that had recognized Sereth's loneliness the first day they met, because he had felt that same loneliness himself. You could not disrupt that with technology any more than you could stop the tide with a bucket. The signal fired. Danny started walking, not toward where his instruments said Sereth should be, but toward where he felt pulled. It was instinct, intuition, faith, the kind of knowing that lived in your bones rather than your brain. Behind him, in the command center, Breslin watched the monitoring screens with growing concern. His neural readings are abnormal. The bond connection is barely registering. Wren leaned forward. Should we stop the trial? No, Breslin said slowly. Look at his path. He is walking directly toward Sereth. Whatever he is using to navigate is not what we are measuring. 50 miles away, Sereth had made the same choice. The dragon could have flown, could have covered the distance in minutes. Instead, he walked, matching Danny's pace, trusting that they would meet in the middle. His powerful mind reached past the interference, past every barrier, straight to the boy who had sat beside his collection and talked about rocks from a creek. They found each other in a valley of red stone, with the wind singing between the rocks. The moment Danny saw Sereth, the dragon's joy crashed through their bond so powerfully that the neural disruptor could not hold it back. Danny ran the last 100 yards, and Sereth lowered his head, and they stood together while golden light spread across the dragon's scales like sunrise. Something was wrong with the equipment, Danny said breathlessly. I could barely feel you. Sereth's rumble suggested he had noticed. But they had found each other anyway, and that was what mattered. The sensory deprivation course waited. They entered together, and immediately everything vanished. No light, no sound, no sense of up or down. Just darkness, so complete it felt like being erased. Danny climbed on his Sereth's back, and the dragon began to move. Other pairs navigated this course through careful planning and predetermined strategies. Danny and Sereth did it through trust. Danny closed his eyes, even though he could not see anyway, and felt through the bond. Not thoughts or directions, just awareness. Sereth's movements became his movements. The dragon's sense of space became his sense of space. They flowed through the course like a single being, turning when they needed to turn, diving when they needed to dive, rising at the perfect moment to clear an obstacle they could not see. When they emerged on the other side, the crowd erupted. Not just polite applause, but genuine awe. What Danny and Sereth had done was impossible, and everyone had watched it happen in the command center. Technicians discovered Pritchard's sabotage. The neural disruptor was meant to make the trial impossible, but instead it had proven something more important. The bond between Danny and Sereth ran deeper than technology could measure or interfere with. It was real in a way that transcended what anyone thought was possible. Pritchard was arrested. In his hearing, he shouted that humans did not belong among dragon riders, that this made a mockery of tradition. Danny listened to it all and felt something unexpected. Sympathy. When asked if he wanted to make a statement, Danny stood before the council. I understand being afraid of change, he said quietly. I get wanting things to stay the way they have always been because at least then you know what to expect. But Sereth was not happy the way things were. He was alone. And honestly, I think a lot of the dragons are alone, even the ones with riders. He looked at the assembled crowd, at dragon riders from a dozen different species. Sereth did not need a handler. He needed a friend. Maybe that is what all of them need. Not someone to control them, but someone to understand them. To let them be who they are instead of what we want them to be. The words resonated. In the weeks that followed, the council restructured their entire approach to dragon partnerships. Other dragons who had been deemed difficult began responding to riders who came to them with openness rather than expectations. The age of handlers ended. The age of companions began. Danny and Sereth became symbols of that change, but they did not think of themselves that way. They were just a boy and a dragon who had found each other in the loneliness. And that was enough that on quiet evenings, they would fly together over Andrus Prime, watching the stars come out. Sometimes Danny talked about Montana and his family. Sometimes Sereth shared memories from his long life, images and feelings that flowed through their bond. Sometimes they simply existed together in comfortable silence, two souls who understood what it meant to be truly seen. The galaxy called them revolutionary. They called themselves friends, and in Sereth's collection, carefully placed among the crystals and armor pieces, sat a smooth stone from a creek in Montana. The dragon's most treasured possession, because it came from a boy who had looked at him and seen not a weapon, not a problem, not a beast to be broken, but simply another being worthy of respect and companionship. That was the real magic. Not the bond, not the trials, not the impossible synchronization. Just recognition between two lonely souls who found in each other what the galaxy had failed to give them. Understanding. Acceptance. Home.